All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining this week's Profoundly Group Chat. I'm really excited this week that we bring together, as you know, leaders from across the ecosystem. And this week we have somebody really special joining us, Eric Baum, founder and CEO of Bluleadz. Bluleadz, as most of you will know, is consistently rated the top ranked HubSpot solutions partner in the solutions directory. Anyone that has tried knows how important that is to get there. And what's even harder is staying there. And Eric, you've done it. You've been a leader in inbound long before inbound was mainstream. You've built something really special. And as part of that, you have a really unique approach to customer feedback and reviews. You've got a repeatable, consistent, client love delivery model that shows up in those reviews. I'm really excited to get into that topic today with you and with everybody. I know everybody's really excited to talk about it with you. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's always great catching up with friends. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
Awesome. Well, to kick things off, Eric, for anyone that might not know your story, would you be up for sharing a little bit about where your career started and what led you to founding Bluleadz?
Yeah, so I am an accidental agency owner, right? So I got into this by accident at the time. This was in 2007, 2008. Owned a couple of plumbing franchises as investments, and I was spending a ton of money in the Yellow Page advertising, which we did back then, about $25,000 in each market, one in Tampa, one in Orlando. And I started doing pay-per-click advertising, built an external website, and hired somebody internally to do that for me. And it was a franchise. It was a Mr. Rooter Plumbing franchise. I decided to get out of the Yellow Page advertising because it was way too expensive. I was starting to crush it online with pay-per-click advertising. And as soon as I did that and told my story back to the franchisor, they were like, "Will you train the rest of our franchisees how to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'll hop on a call and explain it." And after that call, everybody's like, "Hey, will you do this for me?" So I took my first person, like his name was Mike Bettino, my first employee. I moved him over to, at that point, it was 2008. And I started a new company called Baum Marketing Group at that point and had like 50 clients immediately, and started doing pay-per-click advertising. And you will hate me for saying this, but it was like I was charging like $250, $500 a month to manage these campaigns and do pre-inbound marketing stuff for these clients. Way too low of a retainer, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so that's how I started.
I mean, I don't hate that at all. I think that's awesome. What a great way to get off the ground. That's fantastic. So when did you was there a moment when you pivoted to HubSpot? Like, was HubSpot part of it from the beginning or?
Yeah, so I was this. So the marketing agency was a hobby at that point. I had a few employees. I had like 3 or 4 employees at that point, and I realized that I couldn't scale the agency because my developer, that very first employee, needed to touch everything that we did because everything was hard coded in
Mhm.
HTML. So
Yeah.
originally, I found HubSpot as a CMS option because this is pre WordPress. WordPress
Yeah.
was not a CMS back then. It was Joomla, Drupal, Concrete 5, a few other ones. And I found HubSpot as a CMS platform, not even from the marketing side of things. And I started going down the rabbit hole with that. And then what got me hooked and transitioned me into an inbound marketing agency in 2010, we rebranded as Bluleadz, is I started watching HubSpot TV in 2009, watching Karen Rubin, Mike Volpe, 4 o'clock on Friday afternoons. I was sitting there in my office drinking a beer, listening to these guys talk about this thing called inbound marketing. And I was like, this is going to change the way I do business. It's going to change the world. And so I bet on that, changed the agency name, like rebranded, went all in, became one of the very first HubSpot partners in 2009. And then the rest is history, man. I like bet on the right horse, so to speak.
That's
Really
awesome.
lucked out.
What a great story. When you were starting this, that really continues to guide you now. I'm sure a lot has changed, but what stayed the same?
Yeah. So a few different things. If I'm really honest with myself, it's the fact that I'm not the smartest person in the room. And so when I bet on HubSpot, I was betting on Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, like really understanding the market, knowing what they were doing. I was like, these guys are much smarter than I am, and I'm going to follow their lead. I'm going to attach my agency to their horse, so to speak,
Hmm.
and kind of let them guide the trajectory. I'm going to follow what they're doing. I'm going to wrap services around that. And that's tough to take from an ego perspective because every entrepreneur wants to be like, I've got this game changing idea that's going to change the world. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't have a game changing idea, but these guys do. And I'm going to focus on that. And so I've honestly, like, over the years, I've had to adapt just like HubSpot's had to adapt. And I've had to pivot from an agency perspective along the way. But it
Yeah.
really is like trusting HubSpot to be smarter than I am, to be more innovative than I am, and then sat and just basically wrapping services around what they do. And when Brian handed the torch over to Yamini, that was a nervous time for me because I was like, she's a professional operator. She's unproven, like at HubSpot. Let's see what's going to happen here. But boy, she's just taken that torch and really run with it. So I've been very lucky in that I've never left my HubSpot wingman, so to speak. And,
Yeah.
and it's worked out really well for me.
What would you say in the early days made Bluleadz different? I mean, you were obviously a first mover, right? Early partner, but like, how did you sort of position and like, how did you differentiate?
Yeah, so one of the things that has always been true about me is I'm a risk taker, right? So I've owned 6 companies in the last 30 something years now. I've never been afraid of taking risks and pivoting when I think the time is right. So when we pivoted early on in the first like year or so of the agency and really dug in and invested in inbound marketing and leaned into that business model, that was a huge bet on our behalf. That kind of attitude has served me well early on and through the years. Because as you know, the HubSpot ecosystem's changed, services has changed, and we've had to pivot along the way. So there's that kind of like thread that kind of weaves its way through Bluleadz, and that's the ability to adapt and
Hmm.
not be afraid of change. I think many agency owners hold on to things for too long and try to be like, I want to keep going. I don't want to change. I don't want to adapt. That's scary. I could lose revenue. I could lose team members. And I've always been like, I want to be there first. I want to pivot before the rest of the agencies so I can get there first, stake my flag in the ground, and be like, "Okay, everybody rally around me," if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. And it's paid off. I think it's a smart strategy. How do you think about Bluleadz today? Like when you position yourself to the market, how do you do that? Like what's your go to market? What's your positioning?
Yeah, so our positioning for the last 5 years, which again, 5 years ago was a big pivot point for us because that 5 years ago, just prior to COVID, it was the retainer model ruled the day. Everybody and their sister was saying, you need to build a retainer model, in which we did. Like that's how we grew as an agency.
Yeah.
And the end of 2019, I said, there's a shift happening in the marketplace. Most people aren't seeing it yet. And so we rebranded and said, we're going to be a HubSpot onboarding and implementation agency. This was 5 years ago. So we went from inbound focus, retainer focused, to project focused,
Yeah.
which was completely asinine to most other agency owners. They're like, that is not how things are going. We were ahead of the curve when COVID hit. I mean, I'm not saying that, I had any inkling of like the world's going to end, but like when COVID hit, it really sparked companies. They didn't want to sign up for retainers because they didn't know what was going to happen in the
Yeah.
marketplace. And so projects, they were doubling down. So that really, we kind of leaned into it just prior to that. And just by accident, we're in the right place at the right time. And so currently, we're a HubSpot onboarding and implementation agency. In the next 6 months or so, we will make another major pivot because of AI and what's happening in the marketplace. And we're still kind of ironing out exactly what that message needs to be. But I will tell
Yeah.
you, we're at that inflection point that we were at 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, it worked out. It's worked out for us up to today. It's been doing really, really well being an
Yeah.
onboarding and implementation agency. And we still have the retainer side of things, what we call managed services, but that's worked out really well in the last 5 years. In the next
Yeah.
5 years, man, who knows what's going to happen? I can tell you in the next 3 years, going to be completely different than what it is right now, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to ask, like, You're a founder and leader that is able to see around corners, right? You've demonstrated like a consistent ability to do that based on what we've just talked about today. How do you do it? Like, how do you do it?
So I think for me, it's the ability to step back and just think a little bit differently and not be drawn into the day to day reactionary side of things. Now, I will say I have the luxury of having an extraordinary leadership team in place, which allows me to focus on the business and not in the business.
Hmm.
Right. So I spend most of my time on strategic thinking, working on strategy, working on what's next with the team, some higher level leadership management stuff. But most of the team handles basically everything, which frees up my brain to be more focused on what's next than what has happened and being reactionary to what's going on in the market right now, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. Makes a ton of sense. And it's going to relate to some of the questions about your systems. I'm imagining you've got a pretty strong process and systems focus to be able to let the team, to be able to do that, turn those things
Yeah.
over to the team, right?
Yeah, and early on, going all the way back to when we first started Blue Leads, and hey, I needed a new CMS to be able to scale because I didn't want my developer having to have his hands in every little content change that we needed to make to
Yeah.
our clients' websites. We took that very early on and said, okay, how do we make everything systematized and processed, SOPs, let's call it, as soon as possible. I will say we didn't do a great job in the first 4 or 5 years, but after that, we really focused on putting the systems and the processes in place to focus on growth and make sure that anybody coming through the front door, we can get them up to speed and doing a repeatable, scalable, consistent business. And that was most important for me because I was like, man, I don't want to have to recreate the wheel every time we hire somebody or every time we bring on a new customer. And I don't
Yeah.
want to be involved in every single decision at the agency as well.
Yeah. You mentioned that the first 4 or 5 years was there were a lot of headwinds. Like, was there something that you did that was like a breakthrough moment, or like, I don't know, a book you read or someone you brought in that really helped?
Well, probably 1,000 books that I read. So I will
Yeah.
say one of the secrets to my success is I am not a genius, but I'm a grinder, and I learn every single day. I'm constant. Like I read 2 or 3 books at any given moment. I'm reading 2 or 3 books. I'm also watching videos and learning as much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But say 2000, I guess it was about 2010, 2011 is when I found EOS. And,
Mm.
and a couple years after that is really when I dug in and said, okay, we've got to be following the entrepreneurial operating system, which is EOS. Most of the people listening to this will be familiar with that terminology, right? So, like, when I found EOS and really started embracing it after the first few years of having the agency, that forced us to create our mission statements, our culture, so our core values. It forced me to put on paper our strategy, right? Our 10-year, our 5-year, our 3-year, and our 1-year strategies. Like up until that point, I was basically just being reactionary because remember, I had 2 other companies that I was running. I had 50 employees or so over at those 2 companies. That's where I made my money from. So the
Yeah.
first couple of years, I was just like, Blue Leads is a side gig. I'm having fun. I've got 4 or 5 employees, but it wasn't fueling my family's life. And when
Yeah.
I made that shift and sold those other companies and went all in, that's where I was like, I've got to embrace EOS. My future and my family's future is going to depend on Blue Leads. I'm all in. Let's get this thing scaled up. And really following that process over the years has helped dramatically.
That's wild. Did you do you still run like L10s and all of this? Are you
Oh yeah,
still
absolutely. Yeah, of
amazing?
course. So like there is probably about 2 years. This was probably 5 years ago, right around the COVID, maybe pre-COVID. I think it was 2019. There's about 2 years where we kind of laid off it a little bit because we went through some culture issues. And so like we didn't, our team members weren't aligned. We had hired some people that just weren't in line with our core values. And we went through a lot of churn. And then
Yeah.
especially like 2020, when that hit, we went through a lot of employee churn because, as you know, then everybody went remote. And so now our talent pool was opened up across the country. So like we were
Yeah.
getting poached by agencies in LA and New York because we're Tampa based. And everybody in the office was like 36 people. So anyway, long story short, for about a year or two, we laid off and just did the L10s with our senior leadership team. And then when we
Yep.
got the right people back on the bus, get everybody trained up again, then we rolled it back through the organization.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then
We
one
just came from our L10, so we can empathize.
Yeah, that's great. One
Yeah.
thing I should mention too is like during that process, we've got a full-time director of training and content and training. So that person is like, we built out an LMS right inside of HubSpot. So we put our team members through various trainings. OS is one of those trainings. We also train our team on extreme ownership and dichotomy of leadership by Jocko Willink. And so like we spend time, money, and resources in training our team members on the systems and the processes, the culture, and leveling up both their technical skill set and their leadership. All of that compounds on itself to like create this momentum, which enables us to scale.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, speaking of, one of the things that I think everybody is wildly impressed with is your system you've created for delivery. And in addition to delivery, reviews, sort of customer feedback.
Sure.
It's one of the hardest things in the ecosystem, I think, is sort of earning lots of excellent 5-star ongoing reviews from customers, especially at scale. And it's pretty important, obviously, for the solutions directory and so on. You've been able to do it. Bluleadz, obviously, consistently #1 ranked partner on the directory. That obviously doesn't happen by accident. And I'm hoping that we could talk a little bit about the system that you put in place to drive that.
Sure. So about 4 years ago or so, and I forget exactly, it might have been 4 or 5 years ago, HubSpot really started leaning into their solutions partner directory, right? And we were way down the list at that point, and we weren't getting a lot of business from it. We didn't really see it as a huge value add to us as a partner because honestly, we had followed our own script of inbound marketing. At that point, we were getting like 300,000 visitors a month to our website. We were generating 2,000 to 3,000 net new leads a month through our own inbound marketing efforts. So we weren't really focused on additional channels to drive inbound leads. But that being said, once we started kind of climbing the ranks a little bit, we started seeing an uptick in referrals coming from the HubSpot Solutions partner directory. And I said, okay, well, wait a second. If we were to double down and really focus on this, what is that going to mean for our business? So I ran the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. And so I started running the numbers. I was like, well, if we can get to #1 position based on the amount of revenue we're making from this position, we were like 25th down or something ridiculous like that. It's not a one-to-one relationship, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get a return on investment on the amount of money we spend getting these reviews, right? Because it's going to take
Yeah.
time and effort for your team members. We got to build the systems and the processes. And so we set upon this course to achieve #1 in the solutions directory, the partner directory. And it took us probably a year or so to get there. We did it a couple different ways, right? So we tried everything. We tried, approaching our customers and saying, running contests for them. We tried a bunch of different things that didn't work. What did work was really focused on 2 areas. First, incentivizing the teams early on. And we don't do this anymore, but early on we ran contests for the individual account managers working with the customer, right? So we said, hey, whoever gets the most reviews in this month will get a bonus of X amount, right? So we ran financial incentives to drive reviews because
Yeah.
you can't incentivize the customers. That's unethical, right? You can't provide stuff to customers and be like, hey, I'll pay you $500 for a nice review. Like that's just not do the right thing is our most important core value. And like, that's not doing the right thing in my eyes, right?
Yeah.
But you can incentivize your team members just like anything else that you want to achieve inside your company. So we ran different promos for either quarterly or monthly for team members. And we opened it up to the entire team. So if a developer is working on an account, if they got mentioned, right, whoever got mentioned first got that like incentive or got a point, let's say, for the bonus for that. Because remember, in the partner directory, it's only one customer. You can't have like five people from a company. It's one
Right.
customer from one company.
Yeah.
So, if a developer is working on an account, or an account manager or an implementation specialist, they're vying to get that, like, that credit, so to speak. So
Yes.
that worked early on. The other main thing that really provided, and still does provide, consistent reviews is building out the email automation, right? And so, like, as soon as, like, when we ask for a review, it's when we're done a project. Remember, we're primarily project focused now. And
Yeah.
so we're done a project, we're doing the offboarding call, the team is letting the customer know, here's all the stuff that we've done, checking everything off the list, and and in a polite way say, hey, we take our reviews very seriously. It'd be great if you could leave us a review. We provide them, post offboarding, with an email, and gives them some examples that they could say, right? Try to make things easy on them.
Yeah.
But then building out the automation in HubSpot post offboarding call for however long that takes. So I think our touch points is like 14 different emails, something like that, afterwards, because this is the issue that most people fail to do properly, or the mistake that they make is they ask for a review once or twice, they don't get it, and then they stop asking, right? Remember, if your customer is super happy with what you did for them, they're going to leave a review for you. It's just a matter of how many times you have to ask before you get it, right?
Yeah.
So be stubborn, don't give up, and just use automation for that as much as possible. And that's really, like, to this point, we don't incentivize reviews anymore. And we still get 3, 4, 5 a week, something like that, because we
Yeah.
built these systems and the muscle memory for our team. They still know, hey, we want reviews. I get a Slack every single review that comes in, and it's like, here's a review, here's a team member, and here's how many ahead of the next person behind us. I think it's SmartBug now. Like, you are in the review. So, like, we're 264 or something like that ahead of the next closest person in the partner directory. I look at that every single day, every single time we get a review. So, like, keeping that top of mind. And then we shout those things out too. In our weekly all hands meeting, we shout
Yeah.
out, hey, Caitlin got a review. Tim got a review. Here's a review. Like, so we try to celebrate those things. I
Yeah.
know I've been
That's
talking for a
awesome.
while. I'll let you pop back in. Sorry, man. I get
Not at
excited
all. No,
talking
this is
about
great.
reviews.
I love it. I love it. And I love the passion. And it's so critically important, right? And I love the takeaway for anyone on the call or listening to the recording afterwards, like, be stubborn. Because I think a
Yeah.
lot of partners and pros, like, they'll ask, like you said, once or twice. And if they don't get it, they don't want to be a nuisance. And it's like, listen, this is like lifeblood for your org. Like, you got to do it.
Yeah. Now, I will say there's a caveat to that. Like, all of that is still true. However, the partner directory, as a percentage of our referral revenue, or revenue driven by that referral source, is cut in half in the last couple of years. Like, it is not as important as it was
Mm,
to our business, even though we're in number one position. The
yeah.
dynamics have changed, right? I think the way an agency goes to market is different. I think HubSpot is trying to change their co-selling motions. So they're not pushing as many people to the partner directory as they used to a few years back.
Yep.
So to give you an example, we drive on average 6 to 7% of our revenue comes from the referral source of the partner directory, as
Hmm.
opposed to 15%, let's say 3 years ago, right?
Yep.
So it's dynamics change
Yeah,
dramatically.
yeah. I think what for me, the solutions directory, absolutely. I think the use case in my mind is just the flywheel. Like, our partners and pros, their flywheel, and closing that loop as you said, as you sort of, attract, engage, and delight, and or if we look at loop marketing, whatever it is, the last swing of that is like asking for a referral, asking for a review. Like, that's how you continue to build the momentum and make sure that all that energy that you've spent doing a good job for that customer, like, translates into the next thing. So whether it's the
Yeah.
solutions directory for pros and partners, or it's simply like asking for the referral, getting in that habit, building that muscle, building that system, to your point, so important.
You got to make it easy for them, and you don't want to ask them for too much. Like, so we for a little while, for a short period, we're like, well, we don't have any Google reviews. I think we've got now like 4 or 5 like just negative reviews, right? Like we don't have any positive reviews on Google. And we actually got called out by a prospect about that. They're like, you've got like 4 or 5 negative reviews on Google and nothing else. It's like, because we don't prioritize that as a review mechanism or channel for us. And we tried to for a little while. We're like, well, we're ahead of the competition in the partner directory. Let's focus on Google. That didn't work because the friction point for Google reviews, if you're not living in Google, you've got to ask your customer to sign into their Google account, which many times is different than their business account. And so there was too much friction for that. And for
Yeah.
us, the payoff wasn't there. We lived in the solutions partner. So in your case or in another agency cases, like go where your customers are. If your customers and prospects are in Google or Foundly's directory or HubSpot's directory, go where they are and focus your time and effort there as opposed to trying to split things in 3 different channels.
Yeah, makes sense. So in the follow-on asks, you'd mentioned, being stubborn and persistent. Like, what do those asks literally sound like? Like, what are those email automations? Like, how are they scripted?
Yeah, so fun and not serious. Like we're not trying to be too professional, right? So we make light of like, hey, we realize this is like the 7th time we're asking for a review, but we're pretty stubborn, and reviews mean a lot to us, and we hope we did a good job for you. And if you don't have anything to say, like here's a little blurb that you could take and throw into AI and make it your own kind of thing. Like we try to be fun. And we literally we've tried different things too. We've written out like 14 or 15 different emails to put in the automation. We've also tried dynamically AI driven review asks. That didn't work as well as we had hoped. And the more personal, ones that we wrote ourselves that aren't AI generated, they seem to work much better. But most of the time, it's honestly just being, a little self-effacing and be like, hey, look, we realize, this is the 10th time we've asked you for a review, but we're not going to go away. Ultimately, it's not that they don't want to leave you a review. It's that they're busy and they don't want to be bothered. But at some point, if they're like, man, these guys aren't going to go away, they'll actually leave us a review and then we'll stop, right?
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Do you ask everybody?
Everybody, unless they're unhappy, unless we've done a bad job. And we're all agency owners. We all like to think that we're going to do a great job for every single client, but the reality is you let some clients down and some clients are unhappy. So fortunately, we don't have too many of those. So we don't ask those clients for reviews, right? But, everybody else, absolutely. As long as we're doing work for them and we close the project out, we don't ask like part of the way through. Like there's a whole methodology. It's like, hey, as soon as they hit their first value point or their first highlight, right? Ask them for a review because they're riding high and they're seeing value there. And I agree with that. But I also agree, like, I want to keep the pressure on for my team to make sure that we're delivering value through the entire engagement. So I don't want them going after and getting a review and then be like, oh, this customer was happy. And then subconsciously something shifts and they're like, well, we're cool. Customer gave us a good review. We're happy. And then they sit back on their laurels for the next couple of weeks or month until the engagement finally finishes. I want them like heads down, charging full speed, making sure they're doing a great job, and then asking for a review.
Yeah, I love that. Well, what I'll do now is if anybody that's on the call has a question, feel free to come on camera and come off mute, and you can ask Eric. Whoop, we've got Chris on. Hey, Chris, spotlight you. Hey, Chris.
Thanks so much, Eric.
Chris, good to see you again, buddy.
Good to see you too. From all this backstory to all the wisdom you shared on the partner user group that we were on last year together. Super helpful. I've always seen you guys as like the best executor of this is what HubSpot is telling their partners to do. So we're going to do that and we're going to be the best at it. At this point in time, you mentioned the pivot coming up or the pivot that you're currently working on. HubSpot's been saying we're going to be AI first at the beginning of this year. They were riding partners hard, need you to develop AI services, AI agentic stuff. You've got the market also shifting. HubSpot also saying, hey, we're going to change the way we work with partners as far as how you get deals, how we share opportunities. All that feels harder to read HubSpot? And if that's been the play, what are the green flags, I think, that you're looking for? You're like, yep, these are pretty clear. And I think if we align with that, that's our best chance.
And Chris, I don't even know how to answer that question. I will say, I thought I knew when HubSpot was like, hey, we're AI first. Like, we've got a head of AI internally here. And I was like, this is great. I'm glad they're leaning into things. We're going to build services around what they offer and get ahead of the curve. Meaning, like, we were building custom agents for our customers at the beginning of this year, right? Like, we were really focused on leaning into it and providing that extra layer of expertise on top of what HubSpot had internally. And so I was like, here's where we're going. But then I will say, at Inbound, they started talking about all this, when they released all of the agents that they were going to come out with. And just in the last month, the agents that they actually released, we shifted gears completely. We said, we're not focused on building custom agents anymore. We're going to lean into what HubSpot's offering, because what they're offering as far as customer health agents and the cross-sell upsell agent and prospecting agent, that'll get our customers 80% of the way there. So I would say, if nothing else, make sure that you're nimble, right? Because I was all hell bent, like, we're going to offer all these customer agents, and we built this, Breeze boot camp, different levels based on what HubSpot had. And then we had to pivot about a month and a half ago, right? And that's okay, right? As long as you're, make sure that you're not super invested in one channel or one course of action, and then be able to just let go of something that is not working and focus on what is working. I was like, look, I don't want to do all this custom stuff if we don't have to. HubSpot released these things. Let's layer this into what we're already doing. And if a customer wants something that's super custom on top of that, then we can by all means do it, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the key is like the nimbleness. Like, I don't know how anybody could operate differently right now. So
Yeah,
are you,
stuff's changing so fast.
are you making any, like, when you think about systematization and standardization versus the need to move so fast, is there any surprises you've had as far as like, man, this thing was working for 15 years? It's just not. And we got to figure out a way to like remove that.
Yeah, so nothing's worked for that long. I will say, we move when we see that something is not working, then we pivot as quickly as we possibly can. And so I will say, like, now, inbound marketing is a perfect example of, hey, that's no longer working. We all know it's no longer working. It hasn't worked for a long time. Where do we move next, right? So, like, for us last year, we pivoted as soon as we could, as soon as we saw traffic was dropping down and we saw us change in the marketplace, and said, we're going to lean into strategic partnerships as much as we possibly can. We're obviously, doing that well with HubSpot. Let's do that well with some other vendors that are HubSpot app partners. Let's layer into there as much as we possibly can. And now with loop marketing, I think that's another example of like, hey, you need to pivot fast and change the way we're operating. Throw out the old SOPs and roll in some new SOPs, which sounds easy. It's not, as you know, when resources are limited. We're fortunate enough to have a director of training that can pop in and use AI and write these new SOPs and train the entire team and create some new courses to get them up to speed. But the team still has to learn all this stuff, right? And that's not easy either when you've got a full workload. And most of the people on this call and listening to this, you might be a one man or 5-person agency. And it's hard when you've got those limited resources to learn everything and pivot as fast as you want.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate everything.
Yeah,
you
of
shared
course,
today.
man.
Awesome. Eric, one last question, I guess. As I mentioned at the outset of the call, we've got a lot of aspiring pros and partners, people building and just sort of early on their journey. What one piece of advice would you have for those folks that are kind of just starting out?
Yeah, so I would say, I guess, two things. First, pick what you want to do. So if you want to stay small, meaning, 5 to 10 person agency, like, stick with that and be okay with that. Even if you're just a solopreneur and you're like, hey, I just want to be a highly paid consultant or individual contributor, like, stick with that. If you want to scale an agency, then you need to figure out how to let go of functions much sooner. And to give you an example, like I love sales. Like I was really good at selling. And I did the sales for the agency for many years. And in fact, I even hired salespeople to come in and like a couple underneath me. I should have let go of that function much earlier on than I did. I should have hired a sales leader as one of my very first things that I did, and then let that person grow a sales team, because I would be much further along than I am today. Like right now, we've got, 5-person sales team with a CSM part of that and a solutions architect part of that. So like we've got in a VP of sales, I should have done that 10 years ago and I didn't. Most people as an agency owner, when they start off, they want to continue doing the thing that they like to do. But if you're going to scale a company, you need to put the right people in place so you can elevate yourself out of being in the business or working in the business and focus on working on the business. It's oh man, now I can't remember the name of the book. It's the E-Myth Revisited, right? So
There we
like,
go.
yeah, so that's the classic, message from him is stop focusing on baking pies, which I think is the example in that book, and focus on growing your business. And I didn't do that as early on as I should have. I'm 100% in that position now. And I absolutely love it because now I'm focused on like, what's the next piece that I can put in place to grow the company? And it's not me doing the thing, because if you're sitting there doing the thing day in and day out, servicing customers or selling or the finance side of things, like you don't have enough time to pick your head up out of the sand and figure out what's next and look around that corner, so to speak.
Yeah, I got a lot of does in the chat, so I think it's an important lesson for everybody. Awesome. Well, Eric, that's a great place to maybe wrap here. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining, for sharing your insights and your experience with everybody. I know everybody's walking away with a lot of new things to work on and try, including being persistent and going after those referrals and those reviews. So thank you for joining and sharing all of your experience with us.
Yeah, happy to help, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, see ya.